My family has a little vacation home in Colorado. My parents are avid skiers, which was the motivating factor behind that purchase. The home has been in the family since before I was born. It's definitely showing its age in a lot of ways, but it's also like 40 years old. It's not going to look new. My dad's had to do a lot of upkeep on the place over the years. It's still in our family today, and it's really on its way out at this point. My dad talks about knocking it down and putting up a new place, but I don't really get involved in his decision. This story takes place like 15 years ago when I was 8 and my brother was 11. We were up in Colorado during a blizzard. The snowfall was insane, and of course, my brother and I had to go out and play in it. The great thing about going up there when we were kids was the sheer amount of space. The property has a huge opening with woods surrounding in all directions. There's a dead-end road that goes downhill which leads to a few more, almost equally big properties. It's the perfect layout for hide-and-seek or snowball fights or any number of games like that. My brother Josh and I went out in our snow gear to play our snowball fight game with our own little custom rules. Basically, we'd set up 2 forts. We could pick our forts to be anywhere, but we had to tell each other where we were picking. We would then make one giant snowball as the so-called jewel that we'd have to successfully steal from the other base and bring back to ours. Josh chose to make his base on the nearest neighboring property. There was almost never a car, like 9 times out of 10 that we'd go there, so we'd often play games on their property too since they were never there. What we'd do is build little walls to emulate a fort, and then put the big snowball behind the walls. So to get to each other's bases in this game, we could either cut through the woods or take the road up or down to get to the opposite fort. Once Josh ran down the road and disappeared, I was supposed to wait for him to blow the whistle to signal that the game began. I waited for a while, like a long while, over 5 minutes. He had already set up his fort by then, so all he had to do was get back down there and blow the whistle. When it hit around maybe the 10-minute mark is when I decided I probably just couldn't hear the whistle from there, so I started plotting my route. Was it better to go through the woods or down the road? I opted for the road because honestly, going through the woods during a blizzard at 8 years old was a scary thought. I started trudging through the unplowed snow on the ground as flakes of snow blew into my face. With the amount of layers my mom made me put on though, I wasn't cold at all. As I approached the driveway to the neighboring property, I looked through the trees and didn't see Josh over there. With all the brush and trees bare in the winter, it was quite easy to see through the woods. So I cut into the property through the trees to kind of sneak in, but Josh was literally nowhere in sight. I saw his fort, so I looked around, and when I could confirm he wasn't anywhere in sight, I approached his fort to grab the jewel. Before I could, I heard a woman's voice yelling out, "Excuse me, are you looking for your brother?" I turned in the direction it came from, and it was an older woman at the front door of the neighbor's house. I called back that we're playing a game. She responded with, "Your brother's in here." I was very confused. I started walking towards the front steps of the house, and as I got closer, the woman's face got clearer. To my 8-year-old mind, she looked a lot older than she probably was. As I got closer to the house, I noticed at one of the upstairs windows, there was someone looking out at me. For a second, I actually thought it was Josh. It was someone with half their face covered, presumably by a black beanie, and the bottom part of their face covered under the bottom of the window. I also noticed another trail of footprints leading to the front door. They had to be Josh's. The woman was giving me a very creepy smile. I remember that feeling of my heart dropping for some reason. She waved me inside to come in and get out of the cold. I stopped dead in my tracks and screamed, "Josh!" but there was no response. The woman stopped smiling. She didn't expect me to do that. I also noticed that the other trail of footprints was doubled over. If it was Josh, his footprints turned around and headed back towards the woods. I then heard heavy footsteps from inside the house. They sounded like they were upstairs coming down. I started to run, and the woman screamed something at me or someone else that I didn't understand. I looked back once at the house, and that face that was upstairs at the window before was no longer there. I ran off the property back on the road, running through my previous footsteps. I started to hear my dad's whistling from up the hill, the whistling he'd do to get my brother and I home at dinner time. When I made it back to our driveway, my dad and Josh were there already, having been on their way to get me. Before I could even try to explain what just happened, Josh was already telling me that there were people in the neighbor's house telling him to come inside. I said the same exact thing happened to me, so my dad went down there with some kind of weapon in his hand while we waited in the home with our mom. He came back after a long while and said that the front door was locked and no one was answering, so we went to another neighbor's house, and they knew the owners of the house and they called them. This part still gives me chills whenever my dad mentions what he was told. The owners of that house were not there that weekend. Nobody was supposed to be in the house. The cops were called and everything, and my brother and I did have to speak to one of the officers on scene to describe the woman. After that, we were no longer involved. According to my dad, the back door was unlocked and the house was investigated, which turned up nothing. For this reason, my parents took home any extra valuable things in fear of a break-in while we were gone. After that day, we steered clear of playing on that property just from the creepiness factor of that memory alone. Thank God we didn't go in that house. I've been skiing for as long as I've been able to walk. My parents used to ski competitively. That's actually how they met. So it was really important to them that my siblings and I learned as early as possible. Fast forward about 20 odd years, and that's how old I am now. This story happened to me a few winters ago when I was 21 years old. I was a senior in college. Everyone knows the best skiing accessible to the Northeast is Vermont. It was going to be a trip like any other. It was me, Jaden, Rylan, and Amir. I can't remember for the life of me what mountain we were skiing that trip, as Jaden had booked the whole thing and Rylan was driving. What I do remember was that it was massive, with like 7 ski lifts covering all the different peaks. If I had to guess, it was Killington. We skied nearly 2 full days, and I'm sure there were still trails we missed. That's how big it was. It was the second day. After skiing the day before, we had a pretty good grasp on the trails we enjoyed, so this day would mostly be about testing ourselves and pushing the limits, as per tradition. I'd also be lying if I said we didn't have a handful of fireball shooters to liven things up. We were having an extremely enjoyable trip. The double blacks never got boring, and racing down each slope was its own little game. We had maybe an hour left until the lifts closed. We were all exhausted, but we knew as soon as we hit the road to head home, we'd instantly miss the mountain again. We were contemplating how we would end the trip at the top of the lift, when 2 girls without their helmets made their way over to us. Now, this might sound a little odd to some people, but I wouldn't be doing this story justice if I left out this detail. The girls, one brunette and one blonde, were drop-dead gorgeous, and I don't say that in any type of strange way. They were just objectively 2 of the most beautiful women I'd ever seen in person. It was disarming. They introduced themselves as Taylor and Devin, and we started making small talk. They basically told us that they were bored because the mountain was full of older folk, which was actually something I had remarked to my friends about the day before, so it made sense why they approached us, a group of young guys that seemed around their age. Devin seemed like a really seasoned skier, as she kept asking Amir all these technical questions about his skis. Him and Rylan actually own their own expensive skis as opposed to renting like Jaden and I always did, which the girls seemed to be impressed with. Taylor made a comment about our shooters, and we jokingly told them that the alcohol unlocked our true ski potential or something dumb like that, which they found funny. To our surprise, Devin pulled out an unmarked bottle and taunted us, calling us bitches for sticking to a drink as tame as Fireball. The 4 of us welcomed the challenge and happily swigged some of their bottle, which I could tell sent Rylan a little over the edge. He tends to drink more than he could handle, so this wasn't too surprising. I made a note not to drink too much because something about this whole situation just rubbed me the wrong way. I still had trouble believing that these 2 girls would want anything to do with some dumb kids like us, especially since we were all wearing helmets and our faces weren't exactly visible. Things were going really well though. Amir was being his usual overly flirtatious self, but Taylor seemed like she was into it, so I didn't complain. I figured we were just going to spend the remainder of our time on the slope with these girls, which I didn't really mind too much. Hell, maybe they knew something we could do after the slopes closed. Just then, Devin asked us if we had skied down a trail called Devil's Forest, a name which I definitely didn't recognize. Our other friend Chase would have had the trail map memorized as he's literally a walking GPS, but he wasn't with us. We told them we hadn't, and they explained that it was a glade trail that's a little obscure and rarely open. For those who don't know, glades are basically trails that extend in between trees so that you're skiing through a forest. We actually enjoyed skiing glades more than anything else, so this Devil's Forest trail piqued our interest. We told them we were game, and they motioned for us to follow them. We reached a choke point on our skis, and they told us to take them off because we had to walk slightly uphill for a short while. I could tell we were in a relatively desolate part of the mountain, as the snow was perfectly fresh and there was no one around. The thought of an adventure was kind of invigorating though, so I thought nothing of it. Drunk and curious, we clipped our skis off and followed the girls up the mountain. Amir and Rylan ran ahead, presumably to flirt some more with them, and Jaden and I hung back a little bit to give them some space. As we followed, I could tell Jaden looked a little wary, so I asked him what was on his mind. I like to think of us as the rational, level-headed ones in the group. Amir was too unpredictable and impulsive, and Rylan would follow a girl if she let him off a cliff. Jaden said that it was weird that this supposed trail would be inaccessible from a ski lift, which I agreed with. I had never had to walk uphill to reach a trail before. We agreed to just keep a keen eye on things. What could two girls do to a group of 4 big guys anyway? They led us into the forest, and the terrain finally started leveling out. Jaden and I caught up with the group, and it was apparent that Rylan and Amir had both made considerable progress. Rylan had his arm around Devin, who was smiling and laughing. They pointed in the same direction we had been traveling, which had all of a sudden become a downward slope. I sighed, knowing this was another instance where we could have used Chase's help. He would have known exactly where we were and where this trail would have led. Jaden was still skeptical and asked the girls if they were sure that this was a real trail. They responded yes and told us that it would also take us right back to the lifts. Before I could say anything, Devin pulled the bottle out again and told us we had to finish it. Amir and Rylan happily took some hefty swigs, but when the bottle got around to Jaden, he said he was drunk enough. As soon as he spoke, I could have sworn Devin's smile became a really angry scowl for a split second, but by the time I blinked, she was smiling again. I must have been the only one to notice because I looked around at my friends and their expressions were all normal. She put on a seductive smile and batted her eyes at Jaden, asking him nicely. He reluctantly grabbed the bottle, if just to shut her up. By the time it got to me, I put the bottle up to my mouth but didn't actually drink. Everything about this encounter was triggering alarm bells suddenly in my head. I handed the bottle back to Devin, who put it away. I noted that neither girl drank this time around. It dawned on me that I hadn't seen either one of them drink anything this whole time. I checked my phone, half an hour until the lifts closed. I tried to come up with some excuse for why we couldn't ski this trail, saying that we wouldn't have enough time to get back up and down the mountain to where we had parked. The girls insisted that we'd have enough time and that the lifts were connected on the bottom anyway. Then, without warning, they told us that we were wasting too much time and took off toward the slope, telling us to follow them if we could. Amir and Rylan immediately followed, clearly hoping for a favorable outcome at the bottom. Jaden and I obviously didn't want to, but figured we had no choice but to follow, so that's what we did. I let Jaden lead the way, because after all, this was still a challenging looking slope, and skiing in the forest is no joke. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but when we made it to the bottom, I was relieved. The 4 of them were at the bottom of the slope, laughing and flirting like they had been before. Jaden and I caught up with the group, but something was wrong. There wasn't a lift in sight. We were still surrounded by forest on all sides. I sternly asked the girls where the lift was, and they told me to stop worrying and that it was close by. Then they said they'd take us there in a few minutes. I relaxed a little, assuming that I was worried this whole time about nothing. As I was rubbing my eyes, I heard a distinct thump in the snow. I opened them to see Rylan, who was literally passed out on his back in the snow. The girls laughed, calling him a lightweight, but I could tell it was more serious than that. Before I could even react, Amir slumped over too. I started freaking out, and I rushed over to them, unclipping my skis. I thanked my lucky stars that they seemed to be breathing normally, but I was beyond horrified. Jaden took a step towards the girls, asking them what the hell was going on. They seemed genuinely shocked, saying they have no idea what was wrong. Jaden took another step before he too passed out in the snow. I stared in shock, still trying to wrap my head around the gravity of the situation. I just couldn't fathom that this was happening to us. My head started spinning, and I was sure that I was next. The girls had stopped pretending by now, and they looked at me like they were waiting for me to pass out. I felt myself getting dizzy, so I sat down in the snow, even though I wanted to stay on my feet. I demanded to know what they had given us. They didn't respond or even move for that matter. I yelled at them over and over again, but they still didn't react. I wanted to get up, but I quite literally couldn't stand. I didn't pass out though. I kept my eyes open the whole time. Eventually, Taylor turned to Devin and said something along the lines of he must have not drank enough. She looked more pissed off than anything. Devin cursed before telling Taylor that they had to go. I was still frozen. After unclipping their skis, I watched them take Amir and Ryland's skis before trudging off into the woods. I had to do something, but my body still felt numb. I couldn't just let them walk off with my friend's skis. I knew they wouldn't be able to move that fast carrying 2 sets of skis each, especially through the snow. Another few minutes passed, and I started to regain control of my body. I stumbled after their tracks in the snow, but it was actually freakish how far they'd gotten, even with all that added weight. Eventually, I turned a bend and saw them in the distance, way ahead of me. I figured as long as I kept them in sight, I'd be able to track them down. I followed for a couple minutes, and that's when things got crazy. The forest gave way to a clearing, which I could see turned into a road. We must have literally been on the opposite side of the ski mountain, which made sense looking back. That's when I noticed the van parked in the distance. I stopped in my tracks at the edge of the woods. The side of the van opened, and 4 big-looking dudes stepped out to intercept the girls. The girls motioned for the guys to get back in the van, and one of them turned and pointed directly at me. That's when I realized I was in too deep, and also felt like an idiot for leaving my helpless friends unconscious in the woods. The guys from inside the van seemed to be debating whether or not they should leave or chase me, and I wasn't waiting another second. I started wobbling back the way I came, knowing I'd be able to find my friends on the account of the tracks I left behind in the snow. I found them, still passed out. I figured Jaden had had the least to drink, so I tried shaking him awake first. After a couple of handfuls of snow to the face, he was awake enough to talk. I told him what had happened, still in shock. We tried waking Amir and Rylan up, but had no luck. Jaden and I figured we had no better option than praying those guys didn't decide to track us down, but they never came. I might not be telling this story if they had. We waited about an hour for our friends to wake up, and when they finally did, we told them everything. We had a million questions. Who were those girls? Who were those other guys? What were they going to do to us? It was chilling imagining what could have happened had I not been quick enough to pretend to drink. Best case scenario was that we would have just woken up robbed, but even that would have been horrible. Something tells me that no one would go to those extremes just to rob some broke college-looking kids. Besides, who really keeps valuables on them when skiing? I guess Amir and Ryland's expensive skis were worth stealing, but it still felt like overkill. Plus, how would they have even known that we had expensive skis with us as opposed to renting? Things didn't make sense. Finding the car was hell. Reporting it to the police was hell. The drive back home was hell. The people running the mountain swore they'd identify those people, but we obviously had to get back on the road and couldn't verify that. The police took it a little more seriously and told us we'd be updated should anything come up. I think it even made local news, but it's been years now, and they obviously never found everything. To this day, we have no idea what kind of roofie they even gave us. Nothing online described anything that was so effective so quickly, especially in a moderately small amount. Our best guess was that the substance was a mix of drugs, which makes sense because all my friends were feeling kinda woozy after they woke up. Those girls and whoever else was behind the whole thing were some sick people. I can only hope it was just an elaborate robbery and nothing more sinister. This is going to sound a little weird, but bear with me. Every winter, my friends Kyle, Ricky, and I have this little tradition of walking out onto this frozen lake a few towns over. It's not some grand event or anything, we just do it for fun. There's something about the vibe of being out there on the ice, surrounded by the quiet stillness that feels almost otherworldly. It's just one of those simple things we've always enjoyed. Call us weird, but we can never get enough of the serenity. If you've ever been out in nature by yourself with the only sound being the gentle patter of snowflakes, you know what I'm talking about. It feels like you've got a piece of nature all to yourself. The photos always turn out great too, which is a huge plus for a couple of edgy guys like us. This happened this past winter. It's April as I'm writing this, so about 4 months ago now. I know what you're probably thinking, but don't worry, none of us fell through the ice. That's not what this story is about. It was snowing pretty heavily that night, which was the main reason we decided to go. It had been consistently below freezing for a couple of weeks too, so we were relatively confident the lake was completely frozen over. I'd personally take winter over summer any day of the week. I bet all my friends would agree. There are about a million reasons why, but one of them is as simple as the snowfall itself. First of all, it's just pretty. What I like most about it, though, is that you'll never find yourself in complete darkness. Even after sunset, the world isn't entirely dark. The light reflecting off the white snow blends day and night, so you're left with this really surreal feeling that doesn't arise from anything else. The moon was also pretty full that night, so that feeling was amplified. Kyle was driving that night. He had a pickup that handled pretty well in the snow, so we just played it safe and let him drive, even though Ricky was usually the one who chauffeured us around. The lake itself is surrounded by a thin forest, so we couldn't actually drive all the way to the water's edge. I don't think forest is the right word. It's really just a cluster of sparsely scattered trees, but it's more than enough to prevent a car from driving through. We parked in a nearby lot and got out of the car. It was freezing out. The three of us bundled up and walked toward the lake. I didn't smoke at the time, I still don't, but Ricky and Kyle both do, so they lit a couple of cigarettes as we walked. I think it was after midnight, but I can't say for sure. All I remember is that there wasn't a soul out there. Not an animal, not a person, nothing. No movement whatsoever besides the three of us. We reached the lake, and as we anticipated, it seemed completely frozen over. The three of us were laughing about something stupid when Kyle picked up a small boulder and chucked it onto the ice, testing its integrity. It didn't even crack, so we took that as an indication to make our way towards the middle of the lake. We obviously didn't go super far on the ice, that would have been careless, but we did venture a decent ways away from the ledge. We were maybe 100 feet out when something caught our attention. On the far side of the lake, near the edge where the trees bordered the ice, something big and dark was moving. We stopped talking immediately. We just stopped in our tracks, watching. Whatever it was large, hunched over, and moving slowly toward the lake. Finally, we realized what we were looking at. It was a bear. Ricky was the first to say something. He whispered, "Is that a bear?" as quietly as he could. I didn't answer. My heart was already racing. If it was a bear, the last thing we wanted to do was draw its attention. We stood there, frozen, not even daring to breathe too loudly. But then, as the figure moved closer, something felt off. The way it walked wasn't quite right. Too upright. Too human. It also looked like there was something dragging behind it. Nothing about it made sense. It was one of the most bizarre things I'd ever seen. And that's when it straightened up completely, and we realized the truth all at once. It wasn't a bear. It was a person. A person wearing some kind of bear suit. Kyle said, "What the hell," in a low voice, and I was thinking the same exact thing. I know it doesn't sound scary in a generic sense, but if you had been there, you would have been terrified too. I tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. I don't know if I was more afraid or confused, but something told me to stay quiet. The figure kept moving toward the ice, dragging something behind him. At first, it was hard to tell what it was. The snow blurred the details, but as he got closer, I realized he was holding a rope that was attached to the thing he was dragging, and a few moments later, we could see it more clearly. It was a small black bag. It looked like a smaller sized garbage bag, if they even made those. Either way, it was chilling. We stood there, unsure of what to do. My mind was screaming at me to turn around and leave, but my body felt paralyzed. I couldn't move. I don't think Ricky and Kyle were too keen on turning around and leaving either, because neither one of them flinched. I probably wouldn't have left right then, even if I hadn't been so scared. I needed to know what that person was doing. And then, as if the situation couldn't get any stranger, the man unzipped and stepped out of the bear suit. Seeing him as a person didn't make things any better. He wasn't particularly large or intimidating, but there was something unsettling about him. We watched as he bent down, presumably to pick up a rock, but I couldn't tell from so far away. And then the sounds started. He knelt down, holding what looked like a rock, and began repeatedly slamming it into the ice. It might have been placebo, but I swear I could feel the vibration in the ice even from the distance. He was trying to break through, most likely to dispose of whatever was in that bag. Ricky tapped my shoulder, and I turned to see him and Kyle moving back towards solid ground. Without a word, I followed suit, and the three of us tried to move quickly without making too much noise. Every step felt deafening in the quiet, even though I knew there was no way that guy could hear the crunch of snow from that far away. We barely made it a few yards when a voice yelled out, "Hey," from behind us. I didn't even look back. I just started running, praying that guy didn't have a gun. The cold didn't help. I found myself starting to get winded after not even a minute of running. I don't know if he followed. I don't think he did, but in that moment, we were in full-on panic mode. We reached the edge of the lake, and at that point, I was gasping for breath. After a very short break, we made our way back to the car silently, and Kyle drove off immediately. None of us had any idea what we had just seen. Kyle said it was probably someone dumping their trash, but I told him that was ridiculous. Who in their right mind would dress up in a bear suit in the middle of the winter to illegally dump their trash? There was no way. Ricky said it was definitely someone dumping a body, but I told him the bag was way too small for that. The three of us talked about it the whole ride home, but we couldn't agree on a definite explanation. We never got an answer. The reason I'm thinking about this now is because my mom was watching TV the other day and an old missing persons report popped up on the screen. It was a child from around our area, and the timeline of his disappearance matched up pretty closely with what we had seen on that lake. I'm not jumping to conclusions. I know it's a long shot and probably just an unfortunate coincidence, but I can't help but wonder if those two things are somehow related. By the time you're hearing this, we've probably reported our sighting to the police.
Se jævla mørkt der. Jeg ser jo ikke noen ting. Bare ikke på lyset, nei. Så du hvor det ble, eller? Ja. Faen, det kan det. Det er faen meg overalt.
Hi, yeah, I'm, there's this guy just, like, standing outside my window, and he's just, like, looking up at the window. He's been there for about 30 minutes now, and I have, male, maybe about, I don't know, maybe about 30, I guess? I can't tell. Yeah. It's in alley. My address is street. Yeah. Yeah, and he's just, yeah, he's been there for like 30 minutes and I don't know what to do. Yeah, so if you head down alley, right off of, you should be able to run right into him. I mean, he's basically right in the middle of the road. Yeah. Okay.
He won't even drive the truck by himself drunk. He thinks you're gonna
Turn the lights off. So catch him and film
in the car.
Yeah.
So if we're out of beer, They got.
We'll just
I guess
fuck-
lock the door.
All right, so they're back there.
Where are these fuckers at? Where they at?
Let me go piss and then we'll go. Hey, faggot. All right, let's go. Let's go.
Would
Come on.
film a fucking dude while he's pissing.
Come on. Salem, so come on. All right, let's do it. Nice, cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
All right, come on.
We should see the car way before we get to it.
What's on the road up? What is that?
Where?
Something on the road up here.
Put your brights on. Put the brights on.
What the fuck?
Turn your brights on, dude.
What the?
That's a fucking person.
Is that a...
That is a fucking girl.
What the fuck, dude?
It's wow.
Dude, who is that? Is
It's
that...
31 degrees outside.
Dude, is that Kelsey?
No.
All right,
Dude,
look,
that is
go,
a
go, go.
fucking girl.
Dude.
Toot your horn, see if she's...
What is this bitch doing? This is a nutty bitch.
Dude, get
Stop,
fuck,
stop.
go
Let's
check
see
it
what-
out,
fuck,
dude.
Get her,
Fuck, dude.
get her in the car, dude.
Go,
Look
go,
at
go,
her.
come
She's
on.
hot.
Go
Get her
check
in
it
the
out.
car.
Go see what's up. Fuck. What the fuck?
What the fuck is he doing?
Get the fuck out! Go! Get the fuck out! Go!
What?
Get
What?
the
What are
fuck
you
out!
talking
Go!
about?
What? Go, dude!
Hey, go
Get
help
the
that
fuck
chick out, man. What are you doing?
No, dude, get the fuck out of here, man! You don't fucking know, man! Get the fuck out! Here, go!
Are you fucking retarded?
What the fuck? What the fuck? Get her the...
I'm very anti-dating apps, but I guess I'm biased because of the nightmarish experience I had with Tinder. I've only met up with 3 people ever off Tinder. The first 2 experiences were nothing special. I wasn't excited about either of the girls, and there were no second dates. But compared to the third meetup, oh boy, in comparison the first 2 went phenomenally. I matched this brunette girl named Annette. She had up 4 pictures, 3 of which she was posing alone in what looked like her backyard. The 4th one was in front of a pond. At the time, I didn't see it as a red flag that she was alone in all of her pictures. Honestly, why would I? But she was decently attractive, at least in my standards. So I talked to her, and it got to the point where she asked what I was doing that night. And when I said nothing, she asked if she could come over and hang out. Considering my bedroom in my parents' house is in the basement with a separate entrance, it would work out rather nicely. We set a time for her to come over. When the time came, she texted me literally right on the dot that she was outside. Punctual, to say the least. I led her in the side basement door entrance, and we walked downstairs. I tried to make the greeting not awkward, but right off the bat, first impression, she seemed weird. Her responses were short, her laugh was weird. When we sat down on my bed and I asked her how long the drive was, she laughed, like she didn't even answer my question. She just laughed like I told a joke. And as she laughed, she looked right at me, her eyes still open wide. It was uncomfortable, and I already knew I wasn't going to vibe with this girl. I wanted her out ASAP. I turned the TV on in the background for filler, and I pretended to be laughing at the TV because of the constant awkward silences, and she never once batted an eye to look at the TV. She just watched me the whole time. I was able to wrap it up quickly by pretending I got a text about going into work early the next day, and I implied I needed to go to sleep. She seemed like she didn't want to leave. It was extremely awkward. But I managed to get her to follow me out the basement door. When she was finally gone, I had to ask myself, what did I just put myself through? Not even 5 minutes after she left, she texted me, "Are you sure you have to go to bed? I was having fun." I read the text and sighed. I threw my phone on the bed to charge while I went to get food upstairs. When I got back, I had 3 more texts from her, 2 being question marks. The last one being hello with more question marks. This girl was clearly nuts, so I blocked her. Done and done. I went to bed an hour later. I woke in the middle of the night, like I often do. I'm a light sleeper, it's really annoying. Waking up randomly isn't weird for me. I instinctively felt around for my phone to check what time it was. But my phone wasn't by its normal spot on the ledge charging, and I 100% remembered putting it there. So I got up and started looking around for my phone.
I turned on the bedside strip of red LED lights I had hung on the wall to light up the room just a bit. I couldn't find it though, and I'm kind of the person who will let that bother me until I find it. I went upstairs to grab the landline phone and bring it down so I could call my number. When I dialed my number, I heard it ringing from inside the boiler/laundry room, which was connected to my room. I entered the boiler room, and there was my phone left on the washer machine, causing the entire machine to vibrate as it rang. I knew this was bizarre because I didn't do laundry that night. I didn't even remember going in there. I picked up my phone to see a bunch of new messages from some random number. I opened the texts to see 2 pictures of me sleeping. Above the pictures were 2 texts saying, "Nice, good job blocking me." The second one saying, "Lock your door next time." And I realized what an idiot I was, that I was so anxious to get her out of my room that I didn't even lock the door when she left. Then I can't say for certain, but I felt like I wasn't alone in the room. Like I just felt another presence, and I had a feeling that she may have been hiding behind the cylinder boiler in the darkest corner of the room. But I didn't go look. I went upstairs to get my parents and call the police. Given that the girl was dumb enough, or crazy enough, to leave a digital footprint, tracking her and getting charges pressed on her was easy. Her name wasn't even Annette. Her real name was Sylvana. Her charges were a breaking and entering charge and a stalking and harassment charge. I of course got a restraining order, and I've never heard from that girl again. I've tried all the major dating apps, and I never really have much luck on them. My friend told me he was having luck on this app, Hot or Not, so I gave it a try. And right off the bat, I was getting a lot more likes, albeit from girls I didn't really find attractive at all. Still, on my first batch of free swipes, I matched this one cute blonde girl named Julia. I'll spare the details of our conversation, but it went excitingly well. It was one of those rare matches where the girl was attractive and very receptive to my messages, seeming like she was actually enjoying talking to me. We quickly moved to Snapchat. I asked her for her number, but she said let's talk on Snapchat instead. I was fine with that. I added her on Snap and she added me back. Her Snap score was low, like under 1,000, so right away I was suspicious and upset that this may have been too good to be true like I thought. She messaged me, and I messaged back being blunt, asking her to snap a selfie of herself just for my safety. I told her there's a lot of catfish profiles going around, so I can't be too careful. She opened the message right away, but didn't reply for a minute. I thought for sure the account was going to block me any second. But instead, to my surprise, I got a notification that I got a snap from Julia. I opened the snap, and it was the same blonde-haired girl from the pictures. Still, I wasn't convinced, so I asked her to give me a thumbs up or a peace sign. She opened the chat. I was waiting to see if she'd block me this time. She didn't respond for a couple minutes, until finally, she sent another snap. I opened it, and it was half her face smiling, holding up a peace sign. That was enough for me. I snapped her back, and then we messaged for a little while. We eventually made plans to hang out. She invited me over to her house, which was across town, not too far away. She said she was home alone and that it wouldn't be a problem. She gave me an exact address. I noticed she had her Snap map on, so I did a little check to make sure her address matched her Snap location, and it seemed to check out. I told her I'd be over in a few. I changed into decent clothes, sprayed on some cologne, combed my hair, and got in my car to head over. I remember thinking I may have overdid it with the cologne. She snapped me while I was driving, asking if I was on the way. I told her yes. She read it immediately but didn't respond. I got to the house. It had the number 22 written clear as day next to the door. I messaged her that I'm here. She didn't open the snap though, so I decided to just go ring the bell. There were no cars in the driveway, and the grass seemed like it hadn't been cut in a few weeks. I rang the bell, but she didn't answer, so I started knocking really loud. When she still didn't answer, I went back to Snap and tried calling her using that. It just kept ringing though, she didn't answer. Was I just pranked? I suddenly heard a woman's voice yelling something at me across the street. For some reason, I imagined it to be Julia at first, till I realized it was an older woman yelling, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" I began walking back to the street and called back, "I'm meeting someone." She said back to me at a lower volume now that we were closer that I have the wrong house, nobody lives there. I asked the address of the house, and the address she told me matched the address this Julia girl gave me. I thanked her and got in my car. I went to try to message Julia one more time, but she blocked me. I felt like I was played for a fool. They unmatched me on Hot or Not too. Luckily, I took screenshots of the profile before that, because I sent some to one of my friends before driving to the house. When I got home, I sent screenshots to my friend group chat with like 8 other people, asking if anyone knew her. One guy, my friend Darren, said that's Lisa, a girl who overdosed on heroin 2 years back. When he said that, another friend in the group chat confirmed he was right. I got goosebumps because the snaps I got were from a girl who matched that Lisa girl completely. I told my friends, and they thought either I was crazy or the situation was crazy. I'm without a doubt certain the girl in those snaps was Lisa. How this happened, I have no earthly idea. Better question, why was I led to that house? I can't even try to imagine. In high school, I was in a big graduating class, so for that reason, I didn't get to know a lot of my classmates on a personal level. Using dating apps in college, though, I was able to match and kind of connect with a lot of the girls I'd never really spoken to back in high school. I was using my app of choice when I matched this girl, Maria. She was in my grade in high school. I followed her on Instagram and Snap already, but I never really got to know her in high school. I sent her the first message and asked her how she'd been. I talked to her about high school a lot and how it was funny that we never really spoke or had any classes together. She said we should hang out that night. I asked if she'd want to meet somewhere for drinks or food, but she said she's down to just come hang at my place if that's cool. Honestly, I like that idea even better. I told her sure. She asked if my parents were home. I told her no, only my sister. Then I gave her my address. She said she'd let me know when she's on her way. Then it was just a waiting game. I waited and waited for the notification saying Maria sent you a new message. In fact, it was going on past an hour. I sent a follow-up message on Tinder, but she didn't reply. A few minutes later, I checked her Instagram page and saw she posted a story a few minutes ago. It was a meme. Was she ignoring me now? I checked her Snap story, which was posted within half an hour, and she was apparently with her friend, another girl from our high school. I didn't understand. Was she coming or not? I commented on her story, "Are you still coming later?" She opened it a few minutes later and replied saying, "What are you talking about?" I repeated the question, then added a reference to the conversation on the app. She replied, "I don't have that app. Send me the profile." So I did, and she told me right away it was a catfish and to report it. I did so, and I think Tinder automatically unmatched the profile after that. But I wasn't concerned about someone using this girl's pictures. I was concerned someone had my address and knew my parents weren't home. I made sure every door was locked. I truly was expecting something to happen that night, but it was getting pretty late, and I was starting to feel a little more relaxed. When my guard was down, that's when it happened. A horrific scream from my little sister's room. I jumped off the couch to go run to her room. She opened the door just as I made it to the room, and we met at the doorway. She had this horrified look on her face, like she just saw a demon. She screamed that there's someone outside her window. I couldn't believe it. She ran upstairs while I went to her window to confirm it. There was no one out there now, but I knew it wasn't a coincidence. I tried to call my parents, but I couldn't get a hold of either of them. My sister slept in my room with me that night because she was scared. I only went to bed after waiting downstairs for an hour, listening for anything possible. When I was finally in bed, that was when I heard a noise. My sister heard it too, because we both sat up at the exact same time. Our parents weren't supposed to be back that night. I went to lock the bedroom door and then got 911 on the phone. I whispered into the phone that I was certain we were currently the victims of a break-in. I told my sister to be quiet when she started making crying noises. Footsteps approached the door. Then someone tried twisting the doorknob. Then they started banging on the door. And in a deep, angry-sounding voice, a man said, "I know you're in there. I can smell you." The 911 operator heard it, and she told me to hide in the closet with my sister. I waved my sister over to the closet, and she came. We sat in there quietly the best we could, but he kept banging and banging on the door, and my sister cracked. She cried out, "The police are coming, leave us alone." The banging stopped, and we heard the man laugh. Then there was silence. Next thing we knew, the police were outside, and the operator told me to quickly get to the front door if the coast was clear to let the police in. The police then did a thorough investigation of the house, which was clear. The entry and exit point was my parents' bedroom window, which he climbed through off the backyard awning. My little sister screaming about the police must have scared him off. The police recommended we sleep somewhere else, so we went to my friend Joe's house. Ever since then, I always verify whoever I'm talking to from online is actually who they say they are. I was assigned as a security guard with the midnight shift at a very large Omaha warehouse when I was a young man. This building was mainly used for storage and it was huge. We as security personnel were tasked with hitting several stations inside this building on the night shift, and this required that we did a lot of walking. There would always be 2 personnel assigned to the warehouse at night, one patrolling the outside perimeter in a car, and one inside the warehouse on foot. Being outside, sitting in the comfort of a car was obviously the more desirable of the two. I was working a Wednesday night. I was about half an hour into my shift. I would start the shifts walking around for about an hour, just surveilling the place before sitting down in one of the security offices. This room had some low-budget, ancient camera system that at the time was impressive technology, but it only had 2 screens because there were only 2 cameras in the entire warehouse, one in the northeast corner and one in the southwest corner. That's why we couldn't just sit on our butts in the security office our entire shifts and had to actually patrol the place. This was a shared warehouse for some tech companies, and a lot of expensive equipment was held here, hence why 2 security guards would have to be there every single night. The warehouse layout was similar to that of a regular grocery store. There were like 10 to 15 aisles, and one intersecting aisle that cuts between the other 10 to 15 in the middle. I was still making my initial rounds around the place, when I saw all the way down at the end of the aisle I was in, something at the end section. It was like this white thing that kind of resembled the shape of a head, and it was poking out from behind the end section. Mind you, it was so far away that all I could make from it was this white-looking object. I elevated my slow stroll to a moderately quick speed walk, and halfway through the aisle, the white thing disappeared behind the tower of boxes. This confirmed my fear that it was a person, and that I wasn't alone in there. I now ran to the end of the aisle, hoping to see the other night guard walking around or something. As I stood in the southwest corner of this giant warehouse, I looked up at the camera in the corner, and I was pointing in the direction of the thing I just saw. I looked in that direction, and there it was again, at maybe the 7th aisle, that white thing I saw earlier. Now it was a lot closer, and I could make it out to be someone's face, as I feared. But it wasn't the other security guard. It was this extremely pale, ghoulish-looking face. They once again slowly hid their face behind the tower of boxes. I walkie-talkied the other guard on duty, and he radioed back that he was in the car by the back section of the parking lot. He said roger that, he'd be here in 5. Getting off the phone with him, I was nervous to approach the aisle that I saw the person's head. Even though this is exactly what a security guard's purpose and job is, you never actually expect or anticipate seeing any action. I took a deep breath and ran to that aisle and stopped at the end of it to look down it. The person wasn't in sight. I figured they must have ran for it. So I ran halfway down hoping to catch up to them, but I stopped when I smelt this horrible putrid odor. It smelled like a dead, rotting carcass. I followed the scent until it became overwhelming and I found the source of it. It was coming from this big wooden box that was different from the rest of the boxes. I pulled the lid off the box, and inside was a dead body laying in a pool of blood. The most shocking part of it was that it was missing a head. I walkie-talkied to the other security guard again, and yelled at him to call the police and report a dead body in the warehouse. I said this all while running as fast as I could to the back exit of the warehouse, struggling to get enough air. I threw up the second I made it out the door. I ran to the other security guard's car and sat in there with him, gasping for air. He was still on the phone with the police, so I took the phone and told them whatever the other security guy didn't. Given the nature of the situation, they sent like 5 or 6 cop cars and basically had the entire place surrounded. The body was loaded into an ambulance, and for a good chunk of the night, police were in the warehouse doing forensic work. Perhaps the weirdest part of all of this was that when trying to go back to the video footage captured from the night before, the footage cut out for about 3 hours in the middle of the night. There was no explanation for this happening. I've thought about this night for almost my entire life, basically. I don't believe in ghosts or anything, but I don't really have an explanation for this. I've thought about some far-fetched possibilities though, like that whoever the murderer was in the warehouse that night and was holding up the severed head of that body, hence why it looks so pale and ghoulish. In fact, it gave me chills just now thinking about it again. Several years ago, two friends and I heard from a mutual friend about this creepy abandoned warehouse or furniture store that was only a few miles from my house. One night while on a drive, the three of us decided to check it out. We parked at a Walgreens a few hundred yards from the warehouse and started walking towards it. As we got closer, my friend, I'll call him Jim, kinda chickened out and stayed back while me and my other friend, I'll call Mark, continued on. As we approached the right side of the building, it became very obvious that this place had been abandoned for a very long time. The front entrance was boarded up, and there were vines and ivy growing all over the building. Our mutual friend said that the only way in was through a busted-in wall in the back. We went around back, and sure enough, there was a broken-in narrow section of wall we could get in through. We stepped in, and it was completely dark. We couldn't see our hands in front of our faces, so we turned on the flashlights on our phones and looked around. There was trash and debris everywhere on the concrete floors. We were in what appeared to be the main room of the old store, and it was huge. An entire football field could probably fit in this room. We could even hear an echo when we talked. We started looking along the walls, which were covered in graffiti. The graffiti was littered with what must have been gang symbols as well as profanity, as you would expect. What was really unsettling, though, was that as we moved further along the back wall, the graffiti was getting more and more disturbing. One of them read, "Kill yourself tonight." Then the graffiti was getting satanic. There were tons of inverted crosses, pentagrams, 666s, and violent scenes depicted. While this stuff was creepy enough, it wasn't the worst of what we saw. Towards the end of the building, there were some steps leading to smaller rooms. As we shone our lights on the steps, we saw a large, dry pool of what was probably blood all over the steps. This deterred us from exploring the smaller rooms beyond, so we headed to the left side of the room. As we were walking, our lights caught something hanging from the ceiling. We got closer and saw what it was. It was a noose, still hanging from one of the rafters. It became very obvious that the people that come to this place use it for very evil purposes. After that, we decided we'd spend enough time in there and headed for the hole in the wall we entered through. We got outside and saw that there was another, smaller building/warehouse behind the main one. Despite the freaky things we saw inside, we were still curious and decided to check this one out too. One thing that was very odd was that there was a small room in the front of the warehouse that had no doors, only one window. Inside was a large inverted cross hanging from the decrepit ceiling. We came to the left side of the warehouse where the large garage-style entrance was. This building was similar to the first one. It was one large empty room with tons of trash everywhere. There was more disturbing graffiti. However, there were these holes at the base of the walls that were really odd looking. We shined our lights down them but couldn't see the bottom. What were these for? We had seen enough at this point and headed back outside. It was then that my friend Mark got a call from Jim. As he was talking to Jim, his face suddenly changed to a downright horrified expression. I said, "What's wrong?" What he said next sent a chill down my spine. "Someone else is here," he said. Before we could even turn to run, a white truck peeled around the corner at an alarming speed, heading right towards us. We started booking it towards my car, and as we got around the other back corner of the building, we saw another black truck parked alongside. But we kept running as fast as we could, and thankfully the three of us made it back to my car. We got in and peeled out of there. I don't know what those guys in the trucks were there for, or why they chased after us, but based on what we saw in those buildings, it wasn't anything good. Thankfully, we never found out, and we never returned to that place. In my mid-20s, I used to be a party planner and event coordinator. I was basically in charge of throwing dope parties for this record label group. I'd have to rent out venues for a night or weekends, which would allow us to host our events in these places. Usually we wouldn't pay until after the event, and the landlord or owner of whatever property we were using would take a cut of the profits. There was this one time that my group rented this big warehouse for an entire weekend, and we would be hosting parties Friday and Saturday night. Once the place was rented out, I had to do a lot of setting up, which included setting up tables for bottle service, setting up portable bars, and a DJ stand. A lot of work would go into these kinds of pop-up venues. but they were always extremely profitable. My buddy Jack, who was also on the event planning team, was helping me on the Wednesday before the party weekend. He drove a truck full of equipment to the empty parking lot that the warehouse sat in. I was having trouble figuring out how to get the power to a certain part of the warehouse activated. I looked for any kind of electrical panel or circuit breaker box, but I was having trouble finding one. I gave the building owner I dealt with a call, and he picked up almost right away. His name's Carter. He told me exactly where to go for the electrical panel that would turn on the specific lights I was looking for. He directed me to a door that had an exit sign on top of it, but it wasn't on. Through this door, I was in a very short, very narrow space with a door on one side which I presume led to the outside, and then a half flight of stairs on the other side. I was supposed to go down this half flight of stairs, which led to another tight space with a couple doors. This room was hard to explain without just seeing it for yourself. I'm 6'4", so I had to bend down a little bit just so my head wouldn't hit the ceiling. That's how cramped it was down there. This level had very dim nightlight kind of lights hung on the ceiling. Dim but enough light to navigate just fine. I found the electrical panel, and Carter told me exactly which switches to flip. Then I shut the panel door and turned the key to lock it, even though he told me to just leave the key in the lock. I thanked him and our call ended. I heard a loud and obvious buzzing sound that would be going off in spasms. I followed the sound of it to a door leading to a pitch-black room. Pulling the door open was hard as it scraped against the concrete floor. There was this red light in the top corner of the room that synchronized with the buzzing sound. When the buzzing stopped, the light would also turn off. I was trying to figure out what it was, but it didn't make sense. I stepped deeper into the room and noticed whenever I moved, the light would turn on and the buzzing would sound. When I stood still, it stopped. I don't know why, but I was creeped out, so I went back to the doorway of the room. I took one more look inside, and the red light turned on again, lighting up the room with this eerie red glow. I decided to call Carter and tell him about the potential problem with the light and the buzzing. He told me calmly that the light was a motion sensor, and the buzzing was because that one in the basement was busted. I asked what he meant by motion sensor, and he explained that there's at least one in every room in the building, as it's part of the security system. I looked back into the room, and the light was still on. I asked what could be setting it off in there, and he said he had no idea. And that's when I spotted it. There was someone, I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman because of the long, disheveled hair, sitting in one corner of this room, half hidden behind a pile of old boxes. Their eyes were the most noticeable feature because of how goddamn wide they were open. The mouth was like a half smile, and they were moving their arm in a manner that was as if to tell me to come here. I know it took me a few seconds to describe this person just now, but I was literally screaming at the sight of them in under a second. I slammed that door shut and ran back up the stairs and out that exit door. I told Carter we were leaving and not using the warehouse anymore. I didn't ask any more questions after that. I didn't care, it was his problem. I yelled at Jack to get everything he could back into the truck. We collected our stuff as quickly as possible, loaded the truck back up, and left. I didn't even bother locking the door to the warehouse. I just wanted to be far away from there. I still today don't know what to make of it. The Carter guy seemed so weirdly calm about Mike telling him about a deranged-looking person in the basement of his warehouse. Thinking back, that light was probably going off because of that person sitting in the corner waving me over, or doing whatever the hell he or she was doing with their arm. It was a truly nightmare-inducing, horrible experience.